Miss Lizzie. I don't ever smoke the dizzy, but we can always share some ditsies. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to run. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Oh, welcome guys, Miss Liz in the house, and it is the last one for season 6, and I have the incredible James Devine in the back of the studio, and we're going to spill some tea tonight. And his tea tonight is Forgive and Live. That's the tea we're serving, and we're going to do some jazz and all that good stuff. Band teaching, the band teachers out there, we're going to bring you good stuff up, and his new book as well. The book is called, let me get it here, Almost Everything I've Learned About Teaching Band, a handbook for new band teachers. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight, plus some other books that James has written and some past stuff and all that good stuff. And he's going to wrap up tea time for season 6. But before we get started, you guys know how Miss Liz works. Get over to Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, all those good platforms. Give those a like, follow, and subscribe, and let's get these tea times out there because they do make a difference. Now let's get to the disclaimer and then an intro, and let's get James in here and let's spill some tea together. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicating to sharing real-life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. I, Miss Liz, is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by the guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All guests, viewers, and participants are responsible for using their own judgment when considering any action or decision that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have any questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of the discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly at my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com or visit my link tree at Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. Miss Liz welcomes you to join the conversation with an open heart, and if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect your wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you are ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness one cup at a time. Well, welcome to the last Tea Time of season 6, where passion meets purpose and creativity becomes a bridge between generations. Today, we welcome a returning guest whose life has been shaped by music, mentorship, and a deep commitment to education. Joining us is James Devine, educator, musician, and author of Almost Everything I've Learned About Teaching Band, a handbook for all new band teachers. James brings decades of experience from the classroom and the band room, sharing wisdom earned through dedication, humor, and real-world teaching moments. His work speaks to educators who show up every day with heart, patience, and perseverance. James reminds us that teaching is not just about the instruction, it's about influence, connection, and shaping lives through consistency and care. So grab your cup, settle in. Today's Tea Time celebrates educators, creativity, and the lasting impact of those who teach from the heart. Let me get James in here and let's spill some tea together. Welcome,
Hi.
James.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, James, for all my new listeners out there, can you share a little bit on who James was as a little guy and who James is now?
So James, as a little guy, I'm the son of an immigrant from Italy, and had a lot of challenges to overcome through that. Also, the short version of my story growing up is my father was abusive to my mom, and that really had a major impact on me. We ended up having to leave him. We were living in New York. I was born in the New York area in Amityville, and we ended up having to leave him and go to back to Italy, where my mom is from, and we were living amongst different relatives. And during the 2 years that I lived there, and then part of the time when we first came back to the United States, I was molested by a friend of the family over that time. And when you're a little kid, you don't really know what's going on. But as I became older, even though the abuse had stopped, I started to hate this man for what he had done. And this hate was just buried in my heart. I didn't really tell anybody about what had happened. Nobody knew. He was gone. I didn't see him anymore. But I had to come with the help of my faith in God. I had to come to a point of being able to forgive him, to be able to move forward as a human being. And so I made that decision at age 16. I wish I could say that instantly everything was much better, but that just began the process. That began the journey. And I'm now 59 years old, and I talk about it as if it's a 1,000-mile journey. Age 16, I took that first step, and now I'm on mile 997. God has been good to me. I married my high school sweetheart. We have 4 grown children. They've all gotten married, and now we're blessed with 11 grandchildren. So that's kind of the short of it. On the professional side, I was in the Army band for 10 years, and now I'm in my 28th year of teaching music and absolutely loving it.
28 years in teaching. Wow, you must have seen a lot of kids.
I have. The sad thing is that over the years, sometimes you lose track of. There's some that stick in your mind and you'll never forget, and there's some that you don't really remember when they were your student. So, like when I have students who reach out now, I'll usually ask them, "When did you graduate?" So I can kind of put a time frame. Otherwise, I just remember them, but I don't remember the context of when I taught them, or sometimes I don't even remember what school I taught them at.
James, the book that you were on Tea Time for the first time, I believe it was Jimmy, right?
Jimmy, a true story of abuse, poverty, forgiveness, and redemption.
Yeah, I remember that story because I got it in my library in the next room. And another book that you had brought up during that time on Tea Time is the cannoli one.
So that one started as a joke, and there was a movie out, I don't know, about 8 years ago, 10 years ago. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was called I Can Only Imagine. And I took a play on words and made a Facebook post, and I said, I'm writing my book called I Can Only Imagine My Italian Life. And so many people said, oh, when is it coming out? Let me know. I'm definitely interested in it. So I put together some of my Italian stories, or I should say stories of growing up with an Italian mom that had a lot of comedy to them. And that book is called I Can Only Imagine.
Yeah, I got that one too in my library. And that one I like. I like that one. So, James, I'm going to pull up the new book that you sent me that you wrote and talk about the cover and all that good stuff. So let me get that book up here. And for all the audio listeners, just give them an idea of what we're looking at.
So the book is a compilation of about 100 tips that I've developed over the years, learning things the hard way for new band teachers. These were things that nobody had taught me. I didn't learn them in college. And through trial and error, I found a way that worked. And I'm hoping to save young band teachers a lot of time by letting them be able to implement some of the things that I learned the hard way.
So what did you like about teaching band, James?
I love how the kids' minds light up, because I get them. I teach beginning band right now, and then I also have second and third year players. But especially that beginning band, that first year, they come in not knowing anything. They don't know how it's going to be. The first week in band class is kind of chaos. It sounds more like noise than music. And I've had fellow teachers tell me that too. They're like, oh, we feel so bad for you. We passed by your classroom that first week. And then they come by about the third week and they can hear Mary Had a Little Lamb. And then we just had I teach at 2 schools right now, and both of the schools had their concerts in December. And the progress that the students have made from August, when they were just making our first test is actually just make a sound and hold it for 5 seconds, because air is the key to everything with playing a wind instrument. And we go from that to them playing songs that people recognize, Jingle Bells and Old MacDonald Had a Farm, and even more complex songs than that. One of my schools, we did a simplified version of the Hallelujah chorus.
So, James, how did you get the title of this book?
I played around with several different titles, and that's kind of the one that I settled on, because it's more my experience of things. There's a few books out there where people share different pedagogies and different techniques that have worked for them. And so this one is very personal to me, and it's things that are quick ideas that can help teachers. And I really have wanted to, in my life, be able to pay back all the teachers that poured into my life, because I had probably 8 or 10 different band teachers who mentored me and helped me and answered my questions. One in particular, his name was Hosey Haynes, and he was part of when I first started teaching, I did not have a teaching certificate, and I was enrolled in an alternative program. And he was my mentor teacher for that. The school paid him a pittance. It was probably $1,000 for the year to meet with me a couple of times a month and coach me. Well, when that year was over, Hosey said, hey, James, this has been great. Do you want to continue this? And I was like, of course, Hosey, I love this. And I learned so much from him. He lived for about 7 or 8 years after that. And we met every month for that 7 or 8 years. And he just continued to pour into me. So this is my way of helping to pour into young band directors.
So, James, is this a class, one of your classes on the cover?
No, it's the person who designed my book. They found the art somewhere. We actually had to go back and forth many times, because some of the pictures they came up with, the students had not just slightly off hand positions and postures, but really off hand positions and postures. And I was like, this is not going to work for a book aimed at band teachers. So it's just a stock photo. It's hard to get the permissions to have your actual students on there. I would have loved to have done that. But the amount of effort to get the approval from everybody for that these days would have been very difficult.
So, James, what is the hardest instrument to learn how to play?
The hardest instrument to learn to play is probably the oboe and the bassoon. They're known as double reed instruments. The saxophone and clarinet have the mouthpiece and then the reed that vibrates on the bottom part of it. And a bassoon and oboe, they actually have no mouthpiece, but there's 2 reeds that come together. And then that reed is very touchy and very sensitive to weather and that sort of thing. So those are probably the 2 hardest instruments.
So can you play all of these instruments?
I can play everything except for probably oboe and bassoon. If I gave it some time, I probably could. So the way I like to say it is that at the very beginning, I'm better than all of the students because they're coming from nothing. But I tell the students, so my main instruments are saxophone and clarinet. And so I tell the students besides saxophone and clarinet, I said, by the end of the year, you're going to be ahead of me. Now I still know more fingerings than them. I know I can sometimes tell them how to do something like they're not able to do it yet. And I just tell them, okay, you need more air or you need faster air to get that high note. And then they're able to play higher notes than I can. I have a 6th grade trumpet player right now who is in his first year of playing, and he's already a better trumpet player than I am.
I've never heard of the oboe. What is the oboe?
The oboe is a wood instrument. It kind of looks like a clarinet, you probably have heard them before. It has a very distinct woody kind of sound,
Yeah.
and it's probably about so long or so, maybe a little bit longer. It's hard to show you in the video, but it's got a kind of a nasally sound, and it's usually not played very well by beginners. By the time kids get to high school, it kind of has a bigger learning curve to bring you up to sounding good on it. And certain students are attracted to that instrument.
So how old were you when you got into the music, James?
I was in sixth grade, so I was about 12 years old. And the amazing thing is, I almost did not join band. And it's when I think about my life and where it's gone, it's hard for me to believe that. In sixth grade, you could either be in band, you could be in choir, you could be in drama, or you could just stay in the room and read a book. So me and two other students stayed in the room with our teacher and we read books. After about 2 weeks, I was really bored of that. And my band friends, they kept saying, "Oh, you need to come to band. You need to come to band." And so I did. And I found out I was good at it. And I didn't know at that time that it was going to be my career. But I was really good. And then by ninth grade, I was making it into all city band and getting to audition for all state band. I never made it into all state, but all throughout my high school years, I made first chair in all city band, which was kind of like four cities: Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Hampton, I believe was the location for that. And about 11th grade was when I knew that it was something I was wanting to do with my life.
Wow. Amazing how something we don't want to do to start off with, and then that's what we do with our whole entire life, right? It's
Yeah.
like me. I didn't want to podcast. I'm looking at podcasting. James, we had some questions that came in, and I want to get those out to you tonight. The first question that came in is, how do you use jazz to teach lessons about life, not just music?
How to teach lessons about life. I would say the main thing is I actually incorporate jazz pretty much as soon as students have been playing 4 or 5 months. And I created a curriculum called Jazz from the Start for that very purpose. But I would say for a couple of the lessons that come up with jazz is to overcome your fear, because we do a lot of improvisation in jazz and students are saying, "Well, I don't know what to do." Well, you got to give me this thing first, and then I'm going to teach you something, and then you can do this. And then once you start doing that, then I can teach you how to do this, and you get better and better with it. But you got to give me that first product first. You can't be afraid to take that first step. So that's the first and main thing we kind of learn with jazz and improvisation. And then with jazz music, there's so much history and so much. Jazz is really an American art form created by all the diversity we have in our country, created in the New Orleans area when we had the Creole culture and the African culture and the European culture all kind of combining together to form jazz. So there are a lot of lessons to be learned in that jazz history and some of the bands and how they came about. So
do you feel that the jazz industry is dying off, or is it coming back, James?
I think so it's kind of a crazy situation. I think the days of people making a lot of money in jazz or being able to make a living solely from jazz, I think those days are mostly gone. Maybe not totally. There's a few people who seem to be able to make it in that area. Kenny G is one, for example, but not very many are able to do that. What I see in our local, at least I can only speak for my area here in Colorado Springs, Colorado, the jazz bands in the schools are thriving and students love it. One of the schools I teach at now, we just started a jazz band a week before Christmas break started, and the kids are giving up their study hall 1 day a week to be a part of it. And I've got 22 students, I think, in the jazz band. And to put it in perspective, I've got about 55 to 60 students total in the two bands that that I teach there. So almost half the students, or about a third, somewhere between a third and a half of the students are in the jazz band.
Do you find that more students are signing up for music?
I do at the two schools I teach at. Now, some schools are seeing the opposite happen. That I don't know. I'm not quite sure what makes the difference in the cultures. The two schools I teach at, I have a lot of support from admin, and they both hired me specifically to start a band from scratch. So the school that I'm just started the jazz band in, I'm in my third year there of starting from scratch, and the other school is in its first year. So we probably won't see a jazz band this year, but in that school, I have 25 out of the band has 25 students in it. And that doesn't sound a lot to people who come from huge schools, but there are only 55 kids in the middle school. And that is I'm really pleased with that for the first year. And I think that's going to grow at that school as well. By the time we get to that third year, I think we're going to have 40 or more out of the 55 students who are eligible for band being in it.
Do a lot of people bring up Kenny G for saxophone?
So Kenny G is a controversial figure, not because of anything he's done. When I was in the Army band, a lot of people did not like Kenny G because the music he plays is kind of simple and it's not that hard. And we all knew in the Army band, we all knew people who were better than Kenny G. So I think some of their comments were jealousy because Kenny G was making a living doing that. And so some of the people were like, well, that's not really jazz. He's just playing some people called him Kenny G scale, but the music he plays is beautiful. And I play a lot of the songs he plays. And whenever I play them, the audience seems to really love it. I think it reminds people his style of playing because it's kind of on the simpler end. It doesn't necessarily sound simple to the non-musician, but it's pretty simple to play. Because it's so simple, it kind of reminds them of home. I have a funny story. So I saw Kenny G one time. I was stationed in Japan with the Army band, and we were on opposite sides of the train platform. He was going to a gig in Japan, somewhere in Tokyo, and the Army band, we were all on the other side. So we're like, Kenny G, hi, how are you? And he waved to us. This was in the early 90s. And then another time I played, we had a little jazz combo where we did a lot of Kenny G songs. And the best audience I ever remember was a ship that had come into Japan. I don't remember what port we were at, but we were playing a concert for them. And I was playing a Kenny G song and just wailing with the fast riffs, like what he does. And like 300 young sailors were like, yay! Wow! Just about every note I played. I've never experienced that except maybe with kindergarten and first grade students. I'll get that kind of reaction. And we were trying to figure out it's definitely not because they thought I was good looking or something. And so we were trying to figure out what was the reason. And we all came to the same conclusion, the same reason. The music reminded them of home, and they were homesick because they had been out to sea for a while.
So is that one of your favorite memories in the Army?
It is. That was a very,
because that was one question that just came in. What was your favorite memory from the Army band?
That was one of them. One time I got to play I wish I would have kept a diary. One time we got to play for a speech by Ronald Reagan, President Reagan at the time. And so we had all our instruments, we had to like open up the case, and the dogs came and sniffed through them. And then we had to be on the stage like 2 hours before we were starting, and we couldn't leave. And so that was interesting to be able to play Hail to the Chief and be part of that event. A lot of fun things in Japan because we were kind of like the ambassadors of the US. So I saw more of Japan than most Japanese people do. And got to experience a lot of things, a lot of festivals that we played at, a lot of pictures. I wish there was some way to figure out like which family photo albums I'm in from them taking the pictures of the band. I mean, not just of me that they were taking pictures, but taking pictures of the band, especially in Japan. Here in the US, when I was in, I don't know if things have changed now, but I was at Fort Lee, Virginia, and also here at Fort Carson, Colorado. And we had a lot of times where we went and played in small towns, and the people really appreciated everything that we did.
James, can you tell me, how did music save your life during childhood trauma and hardships?
So I was not good at anything. I stunk at sports. The boys all picked on me because they're like, "Oh, you're just a sissy. You're a mama's boy." And I was sort of. I was very close to my mom, and she was probably a little bit overprotective. And so music was the first thing that I was good at. And it gave me a purpose, even as early as sixth grade. It was something I really thrived at doing. And then people were looking up to me after I had played a couple of months. And it really helped to build up my self-esteem, which I would say before that point was at a zero. I really had a lot of work to do in that area, even continuing through middle school and high school, and even through my adulthood, and even in my 40s, and even into part of my 50s. But that work started by finding something that I was good at and that people looked up to me for. And I still had to work at it. I tell students this now too. It's about 10% talent, and then the other 90% comes from working at it. You don't just wake up and be able to play an instrument. You don't just wake up and be able to play basketball. I think it was Michael Jordan who would come an hour early before practice and stay an hour later. And this was even when he was a superstar making millions of dollars. And he said he needed to practice. He's like, I need to get better. He was born with a certain amount of talent, but he had to really work on that to improve it. And even in teaching is something that I get better at with the more I teach and the more lessons that I learn through that.
James, can you share the story behind your 100-year-old sax and its symbolism?
Sure. It's 106 years old now.
Oh,
What I tell people is that the saxophone, although it's scratched, dented, and abused, like many of us, our lives are, it's still being used to pour a beautiful symphony of sound into the world. So I use it as a metaphor for all of our lives. No matter what we've been through, we're still meant to have something that we pour back into the world. For me, it's music and teaching. For Michael Jordan, it's playing basketball. It's different for everybody. There's people I know who their talent is cooking, and when they cook for others, my mom was like that. When she cooked for others, that's how she gave back to the world. It was a joy for her to do that.
The next question I have that came in is, what is your biggest message for students and teachers today?
That's a hard one to say. But I would say the thing I'm always telling my students to do is to persevere. And I think that's one of the things that music teaches is perseverance, because it's not easy when you first start and you don't see the results right away like you would with you have different games. Sometimes you can master in a day or two of playing them, and it rewards you by giving you a lot of points. For music, you have to persevere. And most of the students seem to get it. I've structured my classrooms to be able to help students to see that they need to persevere through that. But I occasionally get a student, I think of one who was almost failing my class this first semester, and he just wasn't quite getting the perseverance. And it was cool to see it about 3 weeks before Christmas break. He was finally getting it. I'm going to need to practice, and then I will get an A on all of my assignments. And he's been coming in several days a week during his recess time, part of his recess time, just to practice. And he's now ahead on his testing. I think the same thing happens with teaching. You're not going to be, in your first year of teaching, you're not going to be an expert teacher. You're not going to be like the teacher next door to you that has 20 years experience. Some of those lessons you have to learn the hard way. Now you can learn from that teacher. And I would say do a lot of observing find a teacher you love and respect, who the students seem to love and respect, and go and learn from them. And you're going to get to that point faster, but you're still going to have to pay your dues. I would say also to teachers, do not make a decision about whether teaching is for you in your first 5 years. You kind of need that 5 years to learn and improve, do a lot of evaluating. And if you get to the end of that 5 years and you have tried to improve and have learned some things, and you did examine, is it the location I'm at, or is it the teaching? Then it might be time to move on. But I see too many young teachers who they're stuck in a bad situation. They last half a year or a year, and then they're like, teaching's not for me. And the real thing is that position or that boss was not for you, but teaching is for you. You just haven't persevered long enough in it.
So we have a question here. How do you keep your band focused, engaged, and motivated?
So I've come up with, I didn't come up with it. I've adapted it, a system called band karate. And I bought these little cheap zip ties, the ones that are like this long, that in different colors. So white, green, yellow, orange, purple, blue, black, red. And the students, I've made a very clear progression of what they need to do to get that white belt. And I'm not sure why a little zip tie motivates them, but I would say in both schools I teach at, about 80% of the students are ahead on their testing. So I have a minimum level of testing. You need to complete test 1 by this date, test 2 by this date. And when you complete test 2, you'll get your white belt. Then 3 and 4 by these dates. And I've got 80% of the students who are 3 weeks, 4 weeks, some of them a half a year ahead. The black belt is earned through the whole year. In my beginning band at both schools, I would say about a third of the students have already earned their black belt. And so they've come to discover the joy of the persevering, the joy of getting better. And they're not necessarily worried about their grade, because they could do nothing. I mean, if they showed up to class, they could still get an A in band if they never got another. If they already had their black belt, for instance, they don't have to go further, but they keep going and wanting to go further. I'm not 100% sure how that has happened. But it's something that, as I've become a better teacher, that part of it has become better as well. So I have high expectations for them. Maybe this is how it happens, and you learn where that right level is as you teach more. I have high expectations for them, but not so high that they can't reach it, because the goals kind of go like this. Here's your goal. Here's the next one. Here's the next one. Here's the next one. Instead of saying, here's the big one way up here, then they can see what they can do to get to that next goal.
I like that, band karate. That's cool. Does anybody do any karate chops when they reach the top?
No, I haven't seen that. And then this is another incentive that I do. And believe it or not, it's actually a joy for me to do. When the entire class has to make it to one of the belts. So for example, when the entire class makes it to white belt, we celebrate. And one of the ways we celebrate is I make a big pan of brownies, and everybody gets a brownie. We take about 5 or 10 minutes out of class, but it's only if everyone does it. And in the 8 years or so that I've been doing that, I've never had a class that doesn't make it. Now, what has happened, there have been an occasional 1 or 2 students who don't do anything. I call them droolers. They stare at the ceiling and count the tiles and drool, and they don't even try. I don't hold that 1 or 2 students against the rest of the class, because they're not even trying. But if we have a student who just is learning slower than the others, I start putting them one-on-one with someone who has already mastered that test, and they go and work with them for 5 minutes. And I see some amazing results from that. So every kid who wants to achieve is able to.
James, what's the hardest thing about teaching band?
The hardest thing, and the thing that I almost left teaching for, which I can't imagine that I would do that. I retired in 2023. I I retired from public school because there was absolutely no discipline. And it was it was what's called in the US, it's a Title I school, which means most of the students are very poor and come from oftentimes difficult and sometimes even abusive backgrounds. When I started there, everything was fine. And the reason why it was fine, the kids were the same, but everyone from the principal to the janitor to the counselors to every teacher in the building was enforcing, this is the expectation we have of your behavior. If you don't follow that, there's going to be consequences. And so although there were some things that popped up a couple of times a month, the school ran smoothly. The kids made their high achievements, and a few of them tested the limits, but everyone held them accountable. When COVID hit, I don't know how it was where you're at, but in my area here, a lot of the attitudes from the people responsible for the kids, the teachers and admin and counselors, they said, "Oh, you guys have been through so much, so we're not going to we're not going to hold you to these high standards anymore." And it became really difficult. I was having 5 to 7 students a day who would cuss me out, stand up in the class, tell me they're not doing anything, tell me what I could do with my life in not so nice words. And that would end up taking 5 to 7 minutes of my class time. Finally, I'd get someone to come pick them up, and 5 minutes later, they were back in the class doing it again. I understand the trying to be gentle with them at first, but then if they come back and do it again, and if this is a daily thing, I even understand if someone has a hard day, maybe they just found out their dad just left, and they explode one day, but every other day they've been fine. That's understandable. But when these students were allowed to do this on a daily basis, and I had 5 to 7 students a day, I was like, I can't do this. I was spending more of my time disciplining that small percentage of kids than being able to teach the 90% who wanted to be there. And so I think there's a lot of teachers who are going through that. There's some schools that are still following that model. And kids are the same wherever you go. I mean, those kids were poor, but like I said, if you have high standards for their behavior, they're going to align with that if everyone is enforcing that. And in the 2 schools I'm at now, we have that. We have that same agreement with everyone from the top down is enforcing that discipline.
Well, it's good when everybody's on the same page, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It saves a lot of time and energy. James, how do you know if your band is out of tune?
That's something that your skill as a band teacher develops over time with that. So you learn to be able to hear it. In band, we use a lot of what's called the pyramid sound. So the pyramid, if you think about how a pyramid works, it's wider at the bottom and then narrower at the top. And so you want more of the low sounds, which is the bottom of the pyramid, and less of the upper sounds. So a lot of times, if you can get the band to be in balance, then that's going to solve a lot of the tuning issues. The tuning is a long-term thing that you have to continue to teach to students. I see a lot of young directors, what they do is they get the electronic tuner and they run down each individual and get them to tune their instrument. And they think that's going to tune the band. That tunes one note. And then every note on every instrument has its own tendencies to go sharp or flat. And so you have to teach them how to listen for that. Sometimes you have to stop the class and have 2 students play. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll have one student, I don't know how much you know, Miss Liz, about tuning, but for instruments, you can move them in and out a little bit, like clarinet pieces. And so if you pull it out, it makes it lower. If you push it in, it makes it higher. And so sometimes I'll have 2 students and one of them I'll have pull out a lot on purpose, and I'll have them both play the same note. And I'll ask the band, I said, can you hear that? It makes like waves that clash with each other. Kind of like if 2 people threw stones in a still pool of water, the waves go towards each other. And then when they crash, neither of them has any energy. Whereas if you just threw one stone in, the waves might go all the way across the body of water. the same thing happens with sound waves. If you're out of tune, those waves crash. You can hear it, especially if you isolate just two students. But if the waves are going together, then they give each other extra energy. And that's why you can have, and when I was in the Army band, we only had 25 or 30 people in the band, and we would sound louder than a 100-piece high school band because we were more in tune than they were. So the sound waves were reinforcing each other, and the high school sound waves were crashing with each other. So it's something I spend quite a bit of time doing. It's not like, okay, I'm going to teach tuning now, is part of all that I'm doing with teaching them. Probably the first 3 or 4 months, I hardly did any tuning. I might tell one student, pull out a little bit on your slide or push in a little bit. But now they've been playing for 4 or 5 months. Now we're going to start doing a lot more listening and comparing. But it's a skill that's developed. It's like a slight incline learning the skill. It's not something you can just teach for 5 minutes and then be done with it.
Yeah, you don't just walk in and swing the swan and poof, perfect band.
Right. Right. And even what I tell students too, even as a professional, I always feel like I'm out of tune. And I said, if you think that way, if you're thinking, what can I do to adjust to the band? You're probably going to be more in tune than the person who says, oh, I'm in tune, I'm not worried about it, because that person's probably not listening.
So James, what's one thing you've learned about teaching that changed your life?
One thing I learned about teaching that changed my life, I think I gave up. I always hate these questions, like, what's the one thing you learned? That's why I wrote the book, because it's got 100 things. 100 things.
100 things. Okay,
yeah.
we'll do 100 things.
But I would say for me, a big thing that helped to change my teaching is to give up trying to be perfect, or trying to get the kids to be perfect even. And a lot of times, especially earlier in my career, I felt like how the students sounded was a reflection on me. And now my goal is, and even I tell the students this goal too, I said, don't compare yourself to the person that's sitting next to you. Compare yourself to you. Are you better today than you were yesterday? And are you going to be better tomorrow than you were today? And so for all of my groups, what I strive for is every day we get a little bit better. And sometimes we can't see that improvement in the day-to-day. But if you looked at what we sound like August 10th and then what we sound like September 10th, then we can hear a big difference. But August 11th, August 12th, August 13th, all those days in between, you don't necessarily hear that difference because it's small incremental differences.
James, finish this sentence for me. Music is
life.
See, and that's part of your T. Forgive and live your life. So let's talk about your T tonight, James. You gave me forgive and live. Why'd you give me those 3 words?
For me, it was my lack of forgiveness was holding me back because I was harboring these hateful thoughts in my heart. I would say to the point of wanting to kill my abuser. When I read stories, the occasional news story in town, usually a battered wife who gets really angry and she kills her husband or boyfriend or whoever, she kills the person abusing her. And all of us, our hearts go out to her, but she still has to face the consequences of that. And she often will lose her children. She loses everything about her life because now she's going to jail for what she did. I understand where she's at because I was there. I had that hate in my heart. I thank God that George was the name of my abuser. I thank God that he did not live near me because I didn't have a chance to act out on it. But I totally understand it. And that is when I was able to forgive and took that first step, that's when I truly started to live. It wasn't instant. It was that day-to-day improvement, just like what I talk about for band. But I started improving and becoming the person that I was meant to be. And it's been a lifelong process, but it didn't start. I was like stagnant from age 8 to 16. Because if anything, I was getting worse because that cancer, that hatred, that was heart like festering in my heart, and it's like a weed. If you One time we had a garden, and it was doing pretty well, and we left town for 3 weeks. We had somebody water for us, but we didn't have anyone pull weeds for us. So when we left, the things we had planted were starting to bloom, and they were a couple inches high. And when we came back, the weeds were about 3 feet high, and you couldn't even see the plants we had planted. If you pushed back the weeds, you could see the plant, and they're barely struggling by. But if we hadn't done anything at that point, the plants would have died, and if nothing else, they wouldn't have bore fruit. But we pulled the weeds and then kept nurturing those plants, and then they grew and produced vegetables for us. It's the same thing in our lives when we let the weeds grow, the weeds of unforgiveness, the weeds of regret, the weeds of hate. That crowds out everything good that could grow out of our lives until we pull those weeds out.
And James, was that the drive behind writing Jimmy to share the story of the abuse? Was to pull
Yes,
those
that
weeds
was
out of
that was kind of one of the steps in my growth and in my healing. I'm trying to think of when it was I first wrote that. I think it was about 15 years ago. So I was about in my mid 40s, and I would say I had done most of my healing by then. And this was like the next step. It's like, how can I help other people to heal? I had already been sharing my story quite openly from the time I was about 30. And then the crazy thing is, and anyone who's been on a healing journey probably will understand this, I thought most of the tears were gone. I thought most of that healing had happened. When I put the story down in words, there were some chapters that I wrote that I was just weeping. The tears were just pouring out. And it's like, this was healing. Even if 10 people get a hold of this book, even if one person gets a hold of this book, even if nobody got a hold of the book, and it was just for me as part of that healing process, it would have been worth it.
So, James, did you use music during that writing process when you were writing Jimmy to like release any of that anger inside?
I don't think I used music specifically. Music has always been like a relaxing thing for me. Playing music, I should say, is more of a relaxing thing. I will pull out my instrument, and there's times where I don't even want to think, but playing the music, it lets my emotions come out into the music. So sometimes, even if I'm not practicing for something specific, I just play some songs just for me. So it wasn't something specific in the writing of the book, but there was something specific with that. There was actually a song I wrote in 2018, and that one was kind of like a next step in the healing process too. And it's called Heal My Insides. And that's the only song I've written that has words to it. I've written probably half dozen to a dozen songs that are just like instrumental songs. But that one had words to it. At first, I recorded it with my voice singing, and my wife agreed with me that it didn't sound very good. And so then I hired someone to sing that one.
And can we find that song anywhere online or?
I think it can be found on my jazz website, which is jazzysaxman.com. I think there's a video that goes with it on that site as well.
Oh, cool. I'll do some homework. Your favorite saxophone piece to play when you need joy, James?
My favorite piece to play when I need joy. I think that's also another song that I wrote. Is called Flowing Water at Sunset. And it's a song I usually perform on soprano. And it reminds me of being by a stream when the sun is setting and you're just relaxing and enjoying God's creation. And so that one is a lot of fun for me to play.
like the name of it, Flowing Water.
That
It just
one's
seems calm.
also
It sounds like a jazz song.
that one is also on jazzysaxman.com.
Well, everybody run over to Jazzy and check that one out. But we do have your other website here, James. If you want to share it with the audio listeners, just spell it out and all that good stuff.
Sure.
I want people to just jump in and listen to the mid show so they can get you.
It's jamesdivine.net, and it's spelled JAMESDIVINE.net.
And James, what do you want the listeners to feel when they hear your music?
I want them to feel joy. I want them to feel peace, and I want them to feel like the cares of the world flow away.
Like the flowing water.
Yes.
One word to describe you today, James.
Happy.
Happy. I was looking for jazzy. Happy Jazzy. Go over to Jazzy Man.
Jazzy Sax Man.
Jazzy Sax Man.
Yeah, that's.
Your favorite color that you gave me was blue. Is that your soul color?
I've never really thought of colors in that way. It's just been my favorite color. If I am picking a shirt or a sweatshirt to buy, I'll usually end up picking blue.
You like blue.
Yeah.
And how do you personally practice forgive and live every day, James?
It's gotten easier the more that I've lived. It's gotten easier, but there's still times you have to practice it. And probably some of the more recent occasions, there are some colleagues of mine that the band field is a very small field, so you get to know just about everybody. You might not know them well. And there were times that I felt like people were purposely ignoring me or not answering my emails if I had a question, and maybe they held a position in an organization I was part of. And I used to even get offended by that. And now I've started thinking, you know what, maybe they're too busy. It's because it's not just me. I've found out over the years, it's not just me they're ignoring. They're bad about answering emails. But I took it as it was something to do with me, or they didn't like me. So I've had a lot more grace and forgiveness. And also, we don't know what people have been through. Sometimes, and especially in our day and age, people can put out on social media that their lives are perfect, that nothing is going wrong, and they're actually suffering through a lot. But they don't share that. And so that can affect how their actions are. I used to get very jealous of other people. I was jealous, and I would envy them because maybe they had different professional opportunities than I had. Maybe they had a school where there's some schools where they walk in and the school is a 9 out of 10 and they're able to take it to a 9.2, and everyone in the area gives them accolades, like, look at what they're doing with their band. And I used to be jealous of that, but I started realizing the hardest working people around me are the ones who step into a band and it's at a 2 and they take it from a 2 to an 8. And they've done a lot more work than the one who took it from a 9 to a 9.2. But they may not get as many recognitions because that 8 is just kind of like an average band. And as I've gotten older too, I have started thinking more about legacy and worrying less about. I'm a recovering people pleaser, and so that has been something I've been able to leave behind more. And my legacy is my time with my wife, my 4 adult kids, and those 11 grandkids, and whatever I can do with those. So I think I'd have a lot more grace now than I did, and I'm a lot less offended by things people do or fail to do.
Well, it kind of goes into the next question that I had for you, and everything just flows on this tea time. How has becoming a grandfather shaped your purpose in storytelling?
So I have found that with the grandkids, my wife and I will often think of stories of our own kids, their parents. and we share those with the grandkids, and these are things they need to know. They need to know their parents weren't perfect, that their parents were kids once and did goofy things and got in trouble, and that sort of thing. And they always laugh when we share those stories with them. And I think also my grandkids have really taught me to slow down. And I'll give you an example. When my kids were little, I took them to the park a lot. But I was always rushing to get to the park. If they wanted to stop and see the ants, I was like, no, we got to get to the park. That's what we're supposed to be doing right now, is playing at the park. We can't stop to see the ants. And so I've really have slowed down and tried to be at the pace of my grandkids. And if they want to stop and see the ants and we never make it to the park, that's 100% fine.
I think grandchildren really slow us down, and they make us look at the smaller things that we overlook sometimes because we're so fast paced, right? But then the grandkid is like, "Can you please just sit down?" Like, I know what my granddaughter is, Granny, Nanny, can we have tea time? And I'm like, "Yeah, we can have tea time. We can sit and pause for a while." So, James, what does it mean to you to close season 6 with me tonight?
It is really, I feel special to be able to close season 6 with you. We're going into a new year. I don't know about other people. I don't know about you, but for me, the last part of the year is always a time of reflection. And I want to encourage the listeners tonight to think about what are some things you're going to cut from your life to make room for better things. Because sometimes we have to make the cuts before the better thing comes along, and that's when it's going to come along. For me, it meant I cut out a lot of podcasts. I did add a few new ones that I was listening to, but I cut out a lot that I was listening to. I cut out 2 of my social media channels, and because I felt like those weren't having as much of an effect as the other ones that I was a part of. And I'm excited for what 2026 will hold for you, for me, for the listeners. But sometimes we have to make those cuts to make room for as someone put it one time, sometimes we pursue the good and we miss the great. And so sometimes we have to make the room for the great in our lives.
I like that, cutting out. I did that for 8 months. I cut out and then I came back. But 2026 is coming, and it's coming fast. This year has just flown by really fast. And James, just having you to sit at the table again and to get to know you as a friend, not just a guest, but see your journey and see you transform from the beginning in season 3. You were the first time on Tea Time. So thank you again for that. And thank you for sitting with me and sharing your story and all of your good things that you've been doing over the years as well. What final message do you have for all the listeners tonight?
If you are holding back on unforgiveness with something, don't keep holding on to it. Let it go. Forgive. If you can restore a relationship, that's great. If you need to ask someone's forgiveness, don't be afraid of doing that. I've seen so many older people who go to their grave either holding on to something that happened to them, or holding or needing forgiveness from someone else, and it just seems to magnify. My mom went to her grave with a lot of things still that she was holding on to. I don't mean any disrespect to my mom, but we've turned it into a funny family story. Even in her mid 70s, she continued to talk about how when she was 5, her 3-year-old sister stole her orange. I said, "Mom, she was 3. You
Let it go.
gotta let this go. You gotta let it go." But she always kept telling that story.
Absolutely. Sometimes we just got to let it go, move on. And
Yep.
that was what your tea was: forgive and live. So thank you again for that. I'm just going to do closing summary, and I want to thank everybody who has tuned in for season 6 and all the other prior seasons, and get ready for season 7 because we'll be back in the new year. But what an inspiring and grounding tea time. James, thank you for sharing the wisdom that comes from years of teaching, learning, and leading with heart. You reminded us that education is not just about notes on a paper or skills in a book. It's about the people we impact along the way. Tonight, we are reminded that great teachers don't just instruct, they influence. They show up, adapt, and care deeply, even when the work is challenging. Your passion for music and mentorship shines as a testament of the power of consistency and encouragement. To everyone listening, may you leave this tea time appreciating the teachers who shape you and recognizing the influence you have in your own circles. Until our next cup shared, keep leading with patience, purpose, and heart. And I want to wish everybody a happy New Year's. And Miss Liz will be back tomorrow with a surprise to give you a little sneak peek of what's coming in 2026. So thank you all for joining me tonight. And James, thank you. And a happy New
Thank
Year's
you.
to you as well, to you and your family.
Thank you
And
so much.
I'll see everybody next year, 2026, and we'll do this all over again.